Hey everyone, welcome back to AFTV. Welcome to the channel, welcome to the show. Little later than usual, apologies. When you see the amount of content we've got coming out this week, you'll understand why. Check out the We Come in Peace videos coming out very, very soon. Forever Arsenal out as well. And I welcome back from very much deserved holiday, Laurie Lyle.
Thank you very much,
How
James.
are we?
It's been a long time.
It has been.
You hooked up in these circumstances. We've done the full-time show a couple of times.
Yes, very true.
Very much looking forward to this.
I am too, and you know, we've been given some news. Mesut Ozil has retired. You can see it all there in the headline. It's the topic. It's the question we're asking. How will Mesut Ozil be remembered at Arsenal? And it's not going to be, you know, just a whole show kind of answering that question. I think we want to look back at almost everything that's happened, you know. From
It's only right we pay tribute to the man. I was personally
think so.
quite saddened when I received the news. Was he 34? That's still quite young, really.
Yeah, very true.
By
very
today's
true.
standards. And listen, we're talking about one of the modern greats, really, aren't we?
I think so too.
I know we're going to talk about it more, but certainly that's how I would regard him. And yeah, so when you see these guys, you know, pass on and they're retired, and you think, wow, you know. But we're fortunate to have witnessed one of the modern day great players, and of course, him having played for Arsenal is special. So,
he really is a, like, you know, the term generational gets thrown around, and I don't know whether the term generational is just referring to talent or whether it's referring to achievements, accolades and all that. You know, you hear it said about Mbappe, and I understand why. Look at that World Cup final performance. I do think Ozil, again, I don't know what people use to, what their meaning of that word is, but to me, if you're talking about a player who was like really unique, really special, like whose talent, you know, surpassed most, who could do things that were just like, what? You know, he definitely had that ability, you know.
If I had to sum him up in one word, I would probably use the word mercurial.
Yeah.
To me, I mean, someone like Mbappe, he's like a phenom, a phenomenal talent. You know what I mean? The things that he does almost without thinking.
Yeah.
You think, wow, and he's blessed with that raw pace and energy, and you know, he does some real outrageous things with the football. Ozil was a little different. He's more of an artisan, more mercurial. He's, you know what I mean? It's a different type of player. They're both great players, but Ozil's slightly different. You know what I mean? He's can make something out of nothing in ways that other players wouldn't even think of doing.
He really could. I mean, I've seen him get assists when, you know, for players that weren't even on screen when he passes the ball, you know, and he'd pull off flicks, and he would, I remember one against, it was in the Emery days where he played a ball to the back post and Kolasinac cut it back for Aubameyang. I remember thinking, what? He wasn't there. How, you know, it's beyond, you know, we've all seen good passes with good vision, but then he would do things that were beyond vision. It was just an understanding that if my way to pass is right, anyone can get to this.
There were times at Arsenal, and I'm pretty sure you will agree with this, when it was almost as if he was playing the game on a slightly different level to some of our players. And that's no disrespect to the rest of the guys in the team, but it just looked like some of the flicks and tricks and passes and things that he was doing, some of the players weren't quite able to read it. You know, and you would witness that and you think, wow, this guy. But for all of that, James, I think it's also fair to say, and again, we're going to talk about this as the program moves on, I would say, I felt that towards the end of his Arsenal career, that he underachieved at Arsenal.
Well, there's no doubt.
And that's the dichotomy. So for as good as he was, there is that feeling that for Arsenal anyway, maybe not Madrid and Germany, but for Arsenal, he slightly under-delivered.
I think some people, maybe many people will feel that way. We're going to answer all that. We are going to answer all that because I do feel differently, but I do get where you're coming from. So we'll break it all down, and we're going to start by looking at his statement and what he said. That's where it all starts, with the statement that came out this morning. And by the way, lots of comments coming in. M10 forever. Ozil is and will always be an Arsenal legend. Ozil legend with a heart. Ozil red as a gunner. Lots of people showing their love for Mesut Ozil. Some people not as you know. I think There's an account at Black Academic in the comments, which I think is the YouTube channel run by Jordan, and I think he's saying one of the worst signings we've made. But
Jordan, you know what, Jordan, right? He should speak his mind more often.
Unless someone's impersonating your account, which would be, I mean,
that's the thing with Jordan. He doesn't like to speak his mind.
But anyway, then I don't think he ever shies away from speaking his mind. I'd love to hear Jordan's thoughts on it. And of course, I'm sure we'll cover in the next for Arsenal as well. But here's the statement. Here's what he said. After thoughtful consideration, I'm announcing my immediate retirement from professional football. I've had the privilege to be a professional football player for almost 17 years now, and I feel incredibly thankful for the opportunity. But in recent weeks and months, having also suffered some injuries, it's become more and more clear that it's time to leave the big stage of football. It's been an amazing journey filled with unforgettable moments and emotions. I want to thank my clubs, Schalke, Werder Bremen, Real Madrid, Arsenal, Fenerbahce and Istanbul Başakşehir, and the coaches who supported me, plus teammates who've become friends. Special thanks must go to my family members and my closest friends. They have been a part of my journey from day one and have given me so much love and support through the good times and the bad. Thank you to all my fans who have shown me so much love no matter the circumstances and no matter which club I was representing. Now I'm looking forward to everything that is in front of me with my beautiful wife, Amin, hope I pronounced it right, and my two beautiful daughters, Ada and Ella. But you can be sure that you'll hear from me from time to time on my social media channels. That is the statement from Mesut Ozil. Look, it's what you'd expect in a statement. There was no great
fanfare.
Well, I mean, like he didn't go out leaving like a message or what I mean.
Particularly heartfelt.
No. I think it was. No. I'm saying the opposite.
Right. Okay.
I'm saying it was just like a thank you to everyone. That was kind of it. Obviously Ozil's not always had the easiest of times. In the footballing world, and that's all just to a side. And he wanted to just thank everyone. And
I think that statement's
in
keeping with his personality, though, isn't it? Because I think that is kind of
understated. Is that what you're suggesting? Or
he's not overly emotional.
Right.
Certainly, he doesn't look it. He doesn't appear to be when he's playing. Anyway, he could be differently.
That was the criticism that was always levelled at him, and then the people that knew him best would always say he cares more than you think, and he's incredibly. I wouldn't use the word emotional, but invested and all that.
Yeah, I'm sure
that was always something that was thrown at him. Like, Ozil doesn't care. Do you know what I mean?
He's not the most demonstrative. Is what and that statement kind of reflects to me how he came across as a player and a person. I mean, obviously I don't know him, so I can only judge his character by what I see. So that statement was kind of reflective of.
Jack says in the comments, you guys are overthinking it too much, and I actually agree with you, Jack. What I meant was, like I said, he's not always had the smoothest ride, and. This was just him saying thanks to everyone, thanks to my family, thanks to the clubs and teammates, and here's what's to come. And he was met with real love from the footballing world. Lots of people calling him legend. Arsenal, I thought was classy of them, put out a thanks for the memories post for Mesut Ozil. Lots of sort of comments under that as well. And look, when you look at the career he's had, you can see why people talk about him the way he does. I just want to get up a little bit of a timeline of the career he had, starting at Schalke in 2006. He was there till 2008 before joining Werder Bremen in 2008 to 2010. We then see him get his debut at a World Cup in 2010, burst onto the scene, very exciting young German core coming through that went on.
I remember that 2010 World Cup.
Knocked England out.
Yeah, I remember in that game. I think he put the heels on Frank Lampard for one of Germany's goals.
I think he did it to Ashley Cole once as well. He was sublime at that World Cup, and no surprise that Real Madrid and Jose Mourinho went and bought him that summer. And look, he did brilliantly at Real Madrid, won La Liga. He had a great relationship with Cristiano Ronaldo. You could see how the two of them would absolutely thrive with one another.
Ronaldo more than once waxing lyrical about Ozil and
Jose Mourinho too.
Yeah,
absolutely. He was there till 2013. Ancelotti arrived, and things weren't going perfectly in in that time, I think they wanted to sign Gareth Bale, didn't they? They wanted to sign Gareth Bale, and I can't remember if they had to sell a player. I think the rumour or the kind of general understanding is that Real Madrid did need to kind of offload someone for the 80 million it was going to cost to get Gareth Bale. Arsene Wenger beats Tottenham in a North London derby, goes in front of the Sky cameras and says to the world, we might have a surprise for you tomorrow on deadline day, and pulls out Mesut Ozil. I mean, how are you feeling on that day?
I remember that well. The excitement surrounding that signing was amazing. It really was. And when you consider that in recent years, you know, I mean, we've sort of bemoaned our plight at transfer windows and stuff like that, to get a guy like that, who was still very much considered in his prime.
Oh, he was considered, when we signed him, he was considered the best number 10 in world football.
Yeah. So I remember.
And that was probably right.
Yeah. And I remember there was quite a few Madrid fans and players. I remember Ronaldo releasing a statement saying that he was angry, or words to that effect.
Oh, really?
That he'd been let go, yeah. And saying that, because at that time, Ozil was seen as like the assist king, wasn't he? Yeah. And I think his stats for assisting Ronaldo were crazy. And Ronaldo was voiced his displeasure at them allowing Ozil to leave. But Real Madrid's a, you know, Galacticos club, and maybe they considered that Bale would be a bigger Galactico than Ozil.
Yeah, I mean,
at that time.
And look, you can't argue with what Gareth Bale achieved. What did he win? 4, 5 Champions Leagues or something ridiculous, and scored in a load of those finals. Bicycle, you know, you can't. I know he didn't leave Real Madrid with the most love, but you can't. When you're looking back and going, was it worth it losing Mesut Ozil for Gareth Bale? The answer is yes, probably. But he was unbelievable for them, Ozil. Like I said, that relationship he had with Ronaldo was special. He stayed with Arsenal till 2021, and we'll talk about sort of the end as well in a little bit. He then went to Fenerbahce 2021 to 2022, and then Basak Sahir last year, and retired today. We touched on what it was like that day we signed him. I'm going to tell you all how it was for me. Before we do, we just want to play you this clip, because people, I don't think, always appreciate how old AFTV is. They talk about AFTV the last 5-6 years or whatever, but Robbie Lahr was there.
He was there,
for a lot of all those cup finals and all that. But he was there with his mic outside the Emirates the day we signed Mesut Ozil, and we've got a little clip from it to show you here.
With a load of gooners, everybody's overjoyed. I mean, how do you feel, Mesut Ozil?
Oh, it's bloody fantastic, mate. It's bloody fantastic. This is the guy who would just come. He's going to make us compeers again. Just imagine him behind Giroud. It's fantastic. Him and Santi Cazorla, all together with Jack Wilshere.
We finally replaced Nasri and Fabregas. We've been looking for someone to fill the gap. We've done that. Now we've got Ramsey. Ramsey.
You think? I mean, different level to Nasri as well.
Exactly. It's much better. Nasri's just all about the money.
Iniesta's only competition. He really is.
I mean, look at the excitement outside the Emirates Stadium. It's unbelievable. There's Robbie.
You know, that's the beauty of AFTV. You know, see the way he captured that moment.
Yeah,
that is raw, unadulterated passion from the fans, and you won't get that on your mainstream channels. That is the beauty of AFTV right there.
It was fantastic, and you know, the thing that's quite special is, if you look at what fans said 10 years ago about Mesut Ozil, he's going to make us compete again. Well, look, we didn't win the Premier League. We had a few runs where we looked like we might, but we won 4 FA Cups. Or I know we had a bit of debate around how much you put that 4th one in terms of him being a winner, but he came back. Well, you won an FA Cup in that first year back.
He's attributed. He's not the only one, obviously, because it's a team. But they ended that 9-year drought, didn't they? From
Absolutely.
2005 to 2014.
Yeah, and he also prophesied a connection with Santi Cazorla, and I think the best Arsenal that we've seen, probably between 2010 2020 for that decade, was probably that Coquelin, Cazorla, Ozil midfield. I thought that was a very good midfield that had the real firepower in front. Alexis Sanchez was brilliant. He had a great relationship with him as well. And then later in the video, I can't remember if we included in that clip, but they go on to say, you know, this will now encourage other world-class players to arrive. Alexis Sanchez arrived as well. Aubameyang was one. Debate around whether Petr Cech was world-class, but probably arrived with a massive reputation. So a lot of what people kind of felt Ozil could bring they were right about.
Yeah. Now, listen, as I said before, a mercurial talent, one that I feel privileged to have gone and watch him play, sitting in the stands, seeing him do his stuff was amazing. Didn't always quite hit the heights, but listen, man, what a talent. And on his day, he could do things that, like I said before, few players would even think of doing.
When you say didn't always hit the heights, super chats like this will back you on that. Syncopaint says 2 good seasons out of 7, overrated and lazy. Now, there were a lot of people, unlike DN, who says Ozil is a GOAT, there were a lot of people that did feel that way, that he didn't work hard enough, that actually for his talent, we always didn't get that, where was it in certain big away games and things like that. But what he did do, and no one can dispute it, is play a massive part in Arsenal winning their first FA Cup, and their first trophy in 9 years.
Facts.
Their first FA Cup since 2005.
Facts.
And he was big in that because Arsenal, people forget that just because we beat, was it Wigan and then Hull in the final, in the Wembley games, we actually had to overcome Liverpool earlier in the round, Everton earlier in the round. There was another tough game. Tottenham at home was the 3rd round draw. The year after, we won it again in 2015 away at Manchester United. And he was a part of all that, and he was part of a big final. He played really well in the 2017 final when we beat Chelsea. We had a lot of injuries. We weren't having a good season. We dropped out the Champions League. He played really well in that FA Cup final. And he was a big part of bringing trophies back to the Emirates.
He was. And here's the thing, and this is going to sound kind of contradictory, because as great a player or as great a talent as he was, it could be argued that he wasn't best suited to what Premier League football in terms of the intensity and the physicality and stuff like that.
Maybe true.
I think it's fair to say that he sometimes struggled with the pace and physicality of English football. That's not to say that he couldn't cope with it. It's just that at times, you looked at him there and you thought, oh, he's struggling a little bit today. The opposing players are getting after him a little. You can see he's a bit uncomfortable. And so that gave rise to a lot of criticism from fans, especially if the team is not performing as well as it should do. Fans, unfortunately, we do it. I've done it at times. I'm sure you've done it as well occasionally. You can scapegoat players and make them the object of your frustration.
So, look, I'm not going to be waxing lyrical about Ozil all video, all stream. There are things that I didn't like. But at that time, if we cast our minds back to, you're talking about that 2014-15 time, we'd seen him for a year or two and people are asking these big questions. I always defended him, and it was for 2 reasons. Firstly, we just come off the back of seeing a Barcelona side, one of the greats, for me the greatest team of all time, that had a pretty lightweight midfield in Xavi and Iniesta that were all about keeping the ball. It was all about pass and move. And I always felt this is what Arsenal want to be. And you've got one of the geniuses of world football in your midfield to try and make that happen. And I always felt if we look overrun or if we look like we're struggling physically, that's because we're not actually doing our bit with the ball as well. So I always kind of defended Ozil a little bit on that front. And it's funny because actually he then got an injury in the start of his second season, was out for about 3-4 months, and then came back and he bulked up. You could tell he'd been to the gym and he just got to grips with the pace a lot better. And I think at that point we really started to see Mesut Ozil nearer his best, especially in the season after. But the other thing I would say is that we'd just seen him at number 10 for Real Madrid. I mean, Jose Mourinho doesn't carry passengers in his team. Yes, he found a way to get the Hazards, the Ronaldos of this world, who aren't known for their hard work in the team, but they all had to do a job. They all had to do what was required. And Ozil was brilliant for that Real Madrid side. So I always found the criticism of his work rate and all that. At the time, I stuck up for him. I thought this is a bit overblown. Does he run around like Odegaard? No, but.
Yeah. I think we have to look at the kind of intricacies of the Premier League. It's very different. It's a unique league. It's very different to some of the other leagues in Europe. And one of the reasons is for what I'd said earlier about the sheer intensity, the physicality, the results you see in the Premier League. You won't get that in other leagues. And it's because of the aforementioned, what I was saying, the pace, the physicality, the intensity, and the sheer competitiveness. And that week in, week out, over a season can take its toll. And I think there were times, especially towards the end of Ozil's tenure, when you looked at him and you thought, he's struggling here, you know what I mean? That's not to detract from his ability as a player. And what I would also say on that as well, it's important to have balance in a team. So if you got your artisans like your Ozils, you also need a couple of dogs of war around him. And I think at that time, Arsenal was seen by many, and it's not a quote that I like to use, but you know, others used it, called us a bit lightweight.
Yeah.
And Ozil was part of that midfield that many people thought that was lightweight and could get bullied on occasion. So you do need a couple of dogs of war in there. That
at Madrid, he had Khedira,
exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe he didn't get that protection.
Maybe not. I mean, I always felt that it was a missed opportunity not getting in some of the players we were linked with.
And also, I'd say in his defences, and this is in his defence, Arsenal knew what they were taking on. So if you get a guy like that, maybe it's a little bit unfair to expect him to be tracking back, running back 30 yards and putting in life and death tackles, because you want him to do his stuff further up the pitch. This is what I'm talking about, balance. So you need guys around him that are going to take that workload off him. And
that's not to say that I'm sitting here going, oh, well, you know, his work rate's not a problem, all that. Because very soon after, Jurgen Klopp came and completely redefined what pressing and work was in the Premier League. And you know, football was moving more in that direction. And I don't think Ozil ever really contributed massively in that side of things. But I always just felt that people using that against him were kind of missing the point a little bit with Ozil, and were being like, yes, that might be true to a degree, but look at everything else he's doing. The players need to kind of get nearer his wavelength in terms of what he's creating for them, how he's trying to play the game. And like I said, the best Arsenal I saw was when you started to get those players around him, where it was Cazorla deeper, it was Ramsey running beyond him, it was whether it was Arteta, who, to be fair, I think Ozil came when Arteta was sort of on the decline as a player, but you know, Coquelin added a bit of physicality there as well, and they were feeding him, and Sanchez, and them two combined. I remember watching a game where I think both were injured at a time, but they came on together. I can't remember which one it was, or one was injured and then he came on, and the two of them were just pinging the ball between them like it was. I mean, you know, they weren't on the pitch together, and then from 60th minute they were, and then the level rose. You were like, these two are world class, and that was, you know, that's when you kind of realised and appreciated as well with Cazorla kind of what talent those three were.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. And like I said, it's all about the balance of the team. And so, like I said, if you've got an Ozil, a Cazorla and people like that, even a Wilshere, who are guys that are very good with the ball. I mean, Cazorla, two-footed excellence. You've got Ozil, very left-footed, but, you know, I mean, he can do great things with the ball. You do need people around him that can take some of that workload off him. And maybe we didn't quite get the balance right. So he wasn't able to flourish as much as we would have liked.
Yeah, very true. Let's go through some more details around Ozil's time at Arsenal. And of course, there was a slightly, you know, sour ending to it all. We've got his stats here at Arsenal. In 254 appearances, 44 goals, 79 assists. Though I think what's fascinating about it is that at Real Madrid, Ozil managed a staggering 81 assists in almost 100 fewer games. That was 159. So,
but it is Real Madrid we're talking about. And he was assisting primarily Ronaldo.
I hear that. You know? I hear that. But 81 assists in 100 fewer games. That is an unbelievable rate. And I think I read somewhere on Twitter, you know, these stats get thrown around, that he has created the most chances ever in football. And like, the reason I'm going to put that in a graphic is because I like to check those for myself, but where do I find a stat like that? So if you know, let us know.
I know there was one year in the Premier League where he got like 19 assists, and that is just one beneath the record. You know who's got the record? 20? Thierry Henry.
Yes.
Yeah. Henry, and Ozil's just one behind, and I think that
has De Bruyne matched that? I think De Bruyne might have equalled the 20.
Okay.
No, I'm not sure. Okay, comments.
Okay.
Let us know.
But well, at one point anyway, we know that Henry had the record, but Ozil was one behind him.
Yep.
When he had that phenomenal season when he was just assisting left, right, and centre.
And he got to that very quickly, but then as Salou says here, Giroud killed Ozil in 2015-16, and Salou, I'm not going to disagree, because he was doing that was a year, I believe we should have won the league that year. The Leicester story was incredible. I think we finished 10 points off them. Tottenham actually ended up at the end of the season being the team that pushed him closest. But Ozil was doing what he had to do, and the team around him, look, we had injuries and there are other things, but I think they let him down more, and I think he was deserving of a winner's medal at that point. He was phenomenal that year. And Giroud, he wasn't even as accomplished a finisher then as he probably is today. I think with age, he's like a fine wine. Giroud's probably become a more accomplished finisher. So yeah,
I think Giroud, as good a player as he was, he's never been prolific.
Yeah, but he's probably become more prolific almost since he left Arsenal.
Yeah. He's a very good player. I mean, as you've seen with France, he's been quite prolific for France. But I've never considered him as he's going to take 3 or 4, isn't he? His conversion rate is not up there with the best. However, what you do get with Giroud is, I know we're digressing slightly, what you get with Giroud is plenty of effort. For a big guy, he is very skillful and he can score worldies, and he's a real team man. So
it also just took so long for Wenger to invest in a striker. Lacazette 50 million, but then weirdly adds Aubameyang for 60 million 4 months later. Kind of signings like that you thought Ozil could have benefited from this a little earlier.
But when you look at someone like Lacazette, that is a testimony to what I was saying earlier about the Premier League. Because if you look at Lacazette's goal stats before he came to Arsenal, right, and look at his goal stats even this season, you will see that he's flying. So that suggests to me that the Premier League is a different animal.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
To some of the other leagues. And that's not to denigrate the other leagues. I just think that the Premier League is a different type of beast.
Well, a comment here from Name says, if you split Ozil's Arsenal career into pre-contract and after, it tells a very different story. Now, the reported salary that he supposedly was put on was 350 grand a week, they say. Blew anything we've ever seen out of the water from an Arsenal salary perspective.
Ever.
Yeah, Alexis Sanchez left that January where Ozil actually committed. But then Wenger left about 5-6 months after that. And I think this was, I don't want to say the beginning of the end. That sounds more, more happened. He gave us some moments, like I mentioned. Actually, the FA Cup final was a bit before that. But anyway, Ozil signed and committed himself to Arsenal where there were doubts he wouldn't, and where Alexis Sanchez didn't. And he was fit and available where Wilshere had problems and Cazorla was having problems. And, for all that, I'm never criticising players who get injured, by the way, but I'm just saying, for all that, credit to Ozil. He was kind of loyal and he stood by us and we stood by him, and the contract suggests that. But then when Wenger left, and people were getting critical of Ozil. I say Ozil wasn't injured. That's actually a lie. He was having missing games with the odd back problem, wasn't he? Things like that. And people were being critical. Where is he? Doesn't fancy it today. All that was being said.
Cold Monday night in Stoke.
And then Wenger leaves. Emery comes in and tries to get something out of Ozil at first. I think in his first season did play him quite a bit. There were a couple of times he wasn't in the team, but largely he did have Ozil in and around. He played him behind Lacazette and Aubameyang. There was something decent that worked for a bit there. You remember that performance against Leicester at home where, he was, off the charts. Unbelievable. One of the great playmaking performances the Emirates has ever seen. But then things started to go a little bit more downhill. Fallouts with Unai Emery, left out. Then Emery kind of brought him back in. But at that point, things weren't going well for Emery and Arsenal at all. Then there was a situation in which he spoke out for the Uyghur Muslims. Arsenal distanced themselves with a statement shortly after that. Now, that's sometimes been kind of used against him or used as kind of a moment in which, when they're discussing the relationship between Ozil and Arsenal. But, he played after that, so it's kind of really hard to know anything behind the scenes.
It did seem that his statement regarding Uyghur Muslims, and listen, I personally have no problem with him speaking out. However, the club were doing a lot of business in that part of the world, and they probably felt that the comments were inappropriate, or certainly should have. Because I remember at the time, Arsenal were kind of caught out by it a little bit, weren't they? Because I think in the aftermath of the comments that he'd made, there was that suggestion from the club that they would appreciate if Ozil had gone through them first. So what they're saying, we're not trying to stop you from speaking out on subjects that you feel passionate about, but maybe if you would have come through us first and we could have worded a statement, it might have been better than you just going out on your own.
Well, the
and there seemed to be a little bit of disconnect between Ozil and the club and the way it was handled. I remember that at the time. And there was a big debate about, it's a bit like with the Gary Lineker thing, isn't it? People speaking out on certain things. It's that whole issue.
Well, Arsenal said in their statement that they just wanted to make it clear that this was Ozil's opinion, that they aren't involved in politics and all that, and obviously that's what I mean when I say distance themselves. He goes on to keep playing for Arsenal, and you've got at this point Arteta's come in. He was around a similar time.
Of course, they played together.
They had played together. Arteta said in his press conference, I need to understand his environment, his headspace. I need to understand what hasn't worked for him and why. And actually played him a lot up until lockdown. Ozil was a regular feature in the Arsenal team for Mikel Arteta. And it's quite funny because I looked back with Graham very recently at how Arsenal set up in that first game under Arteta. And Ozil was very much playing that Ødegaard role, drifting out to the right, combining with the right winger who on the day was Reece Nelson. And lockdown happens, and then more sort of
that changed the world. Lockdown.
It did, and it was to be that header for Lacazette's goal against West Ham was to be his last assist and his last appearance in an Arsenal shirt professionally. Anyway, I think he played the odd friendly. Now, what we've got here is a clip from an interview conducted by Robbie and Turkish on AFTV. We're actually going to put the link in the description. A great interview with his agent, Mesut Ozil's agent, Erkut Serget, who's actually been on the channel a few times as well since then. Absolute pleasure, hearing what he had to say. Here's a little clip where he basically explains the Ozil side of things at the time of the pay cut debate, in which the players were asked to take a certain pay cut to help the team, to help the club through the financial crisis that was happening because of COVID. And this was what Erkut had to say.
He was always giving. And in that time, when this happened with the salary cut, he said as well, he asked me, where's the money going? Right? As a player, he asked me, when we get the salary cut, what's happening? And we as agents and lawyers were not involved in the process as well. It was with the players directly, and they were chatting about that on their WhatsApp group and everything. We came into the game last day when Mesut didn't say yes or no to anything, right? And I said very, very straightforward, I said to the guys, they're not working in the club anymore. I said, Mesut wants a guarantee that the money is used for the people inside the club, that you will not fire anyone. Everyone has written. No one will get fired, because that was the thing we were talking. You will get you'll get a salary cut because we don't want to fire anyone. Yeah. That was one of the topics, right? And as well, that's management needs to have a salary cut and ownership, everything. So there was a list, and Mesut said, if that happens, I'm happy to give more. That was
more than the,
yeah. Because
I think at the time it was 15%.
Yeah, he said I can give 30. I don't mind.
It's 30.
Yes.
So he's looking to. He was looking to double.
But unless it's proven and it's signed and legally where the money is going, and no one is getting fired, because he said I don't want anyone. I want my money to be used to secure people's work.
Otherwise, he can do it outside himself.
If I'm not getting the proven, I do my own charity, which is going on anyway in North London, food projects for years. So we just put the money actually, which he said, look. So Arsenal didn't gave that to us.
Really, really fascinating interview with Erkut. Honestly, really recommend that you go and check that out. And of course, he also talks about his book as well. Go check that all out. Always fantastic to hear his thoughts, and he gave us some really good insight.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that, and of course, I remember the whole period surrounding COVID and all the different multifaceted problems they brought. And you've got to understand, that was a unique time in our history, COVID. And I remember at the time, people were scapegoating Ozil, weren't they? Even Arsenal fans were saying, look, you're on 350 grand a week, everyone's taking a pay cut, everyone's being hit, why can't you, and stuff like that. And I must admit, and I'm not just saying this now, you can go back and check our Talk is Cheap shows that myself and Curtis did. I had no problem with his stance at all. Yeah, I had no problem with his stance.
At the time, and I want to make it clear that I think my mind has changed a bit since then, but at the time, I felt like I didn't have a problem with it because I thought there'll be a reason, and he does so much charitable work. Erkut talks about that and talks about the values that I think he said his mum sort of ingrained in him about, if you've got wealth, you must share it and all that. And I kind of never really doubted that. I never thought it was coming from a bad place.
No. Well, you will know. Mesut Ozil is not just Muslim, he's committed, and a lot of his values will, show up in his faith. So that's entirely in keeping with the way he thinks.
Shaq says Ozil did so much charity for everyone. Very, very true. And look, but a lot of people loved him for all that, and rightly so. It wasn't just being a supremely talented footballer who won the World Cup and did what he did for Real Madrid and Arsenal. You're right. It was that he had this really charitable side to him.
Yeah. But some elements of the press, I remember this, were portraying him as that greedy footballer.
Right. And Urquhart touches on that. And actually, a lot of Arsenal fans as well did feel that way.
Yeah.
Now, when I look back on it, the other thing I keep thinking is I always do the whole, well, Ozil would have wanted to do this, and I don't think he's a bad guy. But then when I look back, I think, but Arteta, who is now the man still here, still in charge, and leading a group of players I absolutely love, I don't know how much involvement he had on those decisions, but other people did pull in that direction. So,
when you say pull in that direction, what do you mean?
Of the pay cut, of the trusting the club to do what they had to do, in that situation.
So they were saying, they're intimating that he should have taken a pay cut then?
Well, I'm thinking that I can understand. I'm doing my usual James sitting on the fence, where the truth is I have no idea. Like I understand what Urquhart's saying there, but then a lot of people did go down that route, and I would trust people that I see as leaders now, that I'd see as wanting to do the best thing for the club, like Granit Xhaka, who was around back then, El Neni or whatever, players that I then wonder, okay, so what were they really happy with that led them to do it? But then when there were reports that there were other players that refused to pay cut as well, but in typical fashion, they weren't revealed.
That's right.
Whereas,
well, I think the reason why Ozil stood out so much, because he was by far the biggest earner at the club at the time. Yeah. So people looked at just figures. Well, if you're earning 350 grand a week, mate, and the whole country's going through a bit of a crisis and people are losing their jobs, and Arsenal may have to lay off people because they can't afford to pay their wages, which I did find at the time, I found a little bit, Then he became a bit of a scapegoat, didn't he? And like I said, there is this impression that some people have of footballers as being avaricious and greedy and all about themselves. And some elements of the press were trying to portray Ozil in that light, and I felt that was very unfair. You've already spoken about his charitable work, which he's a well-known football philanthropist, isn't he, Ozil? So,
well, Khalid says here, the club let go of so many staff members after the players took a pay cut. James, you can't be defending that some players will have a more stronger stance than others. Khalid, I want to make it really clear, and this is why I'm always quite hesitant when I'm talking about this thing like the pay cut, is that I don't really take any side on it. I think when I look back, I believe what Urquhart was saying. We played that clip. In this video, I went and found that clip because I felt it was important, having had him on the channel, that we hear that side. But like I said, there's another side to every story. And was that the thing that meant? That's where there's coincidence. That happened, and then you don't see him in an Arsenal shirt ever again. But it's really hard to know, because there was a long period of lockdown, and then Arsenal come back. Guendouzi has his moment against Brighton, then you don't see him anymore. So Arteta clearly, and the club, had a ruthless approach with certain players that weren't operating in a way that they felt was conducive to a long-term future. You saw that with Aubameyang, who had a much longer run with Arteta before he got to a point where he was, essentially moved on as well. And the thing is that it ended badly from that point. And what you ended up getting was a situation, and this is where, of everything, this is the thing that hurt me a little bit, was when he tweeted after we lost 5-0 to Man City, he tweeted, "Trust the process," with a sort of a tear emoji and a broken heart emoji. And that was a moment that I didn't take well. I thought...
That was ill-advised.
Well, I thought, hold on. We Arsenal fans, that's the only people you're reaching on Twitter. Okay, yes, other people at the club are going to see it, but we saw that. And look, I'm sure a lot of Arsenal fans at the time were thinking, yeah, I'm done with this process, I'm done with Arteta, I'm done with the direction the club's going in. But that hurt, because I thought, we're not the people, we're not your enemy here, Mesut, if that makes sense. And I took issue with that, and actually, since things have gone really well for Arsenal, that tweet's been dug up and used against them at times. Like, yeah, we will trust the process, thank you very much. And so it was clearly a bitter end. And
As was his time with Germany. The national team ended quite bitterly as well.
There's a lot of blaming him, wasn't there, for
and I have to say,
2018 World
Real
Cup.
Madrid, I remember when he left Madrid, Mourinho made some kind of off-key statements about him. Yeah. There was one that I read where he was almost accusing Ozil, I've got to choose my words carefully here, but he seemed to be questioning his bravery in the tackle and things like that.
Okay, I don't remember seeing that quote.
Yeah, Mourinho.
Because Mourinho, since Ozil joined Arsenal, Mourinho's done nothing but speak wonders of him. So, but look,
Mourinho is quite a complex character. So,
I want to leave we've touched on some of that bitter ending, and we can't ignore that happened.
Yeah, we can't ignore that.
No.
I remember at the time. Listen, what I would say is this, and we saw a similar scenario with Aubameyang, and James, I'm a big fan and still am of Aubameyang. What tends to happen with these high-profile, highly paid players that become the focus of the club is when things are running fine, it's fine and dandy. When things are not going so well on the pitch, players are not performing at their optimum levels, the clubs will find a way of getting rid of them. It's a very cutthroat and ruthless business. And what you saw happen with Ozil is what's happened to a number of high-profile players at many clubs, not just Arsenal. As soon as a performance level starts to dip and the club is not being successful anymore, what clubs will tend to do is look at the highest paid, higher profile players, and they will find a way of engineering them out of the club. And that's exactly what happened with Ozil.
Well, Andrew here says he was talking as a fan to the Arsenal fans, James, and then gives me a little shush emoji. So that's nice of you, Andrew. Really? You really think he was tweeting that as a fan who was just sticking up for the Arsenal fans and just trying to sympathise with what we were all going through? He's trying to make a point.
No, of course he was.
Absolutely was. And if you see it differently, fine. I've been more than defensive of Ozil when other people have been
what I would say about that
was one moment that I took issue with.
What I would say about that is, let's be honest, he does have the right of reply. He does have the right to do that. However, what I would say is that
didn't he do an interview with David Ornstein once? I think he did an interview with Ornstein about stuff, or I can't remember.
I seem to remember. But what I would say about that whole thing with the comment that he made is that he will have his right to a reply. We saw with Aubameyang, he had one or two things to say as well. Perhaps we shouldn't be too harsh on these people. They are human.
Yeah.
However, what tends to happen with the fullness of time, those remarks or those comments can come across as a little ill-advised.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's best to keep your counsel and not say nothing. Maybe wait until you got a book come out, then you can address everything then. But when you come out and say things, then 9 times out of 10, what it does, and it did in Ozil's case, it will put fans against you because they'll say, listen, man, we hero worshipped you when you was at the club. Now it seems that you are almost enjoying our demise, and we don't take too kindly to that.
That I took it as, maybe not I'd go as far as say as enjoying, but I think he was using that opportunity to make a little bit of a point. Like anyone who's saying that he was trying to defend the Arsenal fans there, or he was trying to actually say you should trust the process, rubbish. I don't think he was at all, and I'm quite strong on that one.
But that should not sully his reputation too much of the club.
No,
that was just something that I think was born out of the frustration of the things he went through.
But Arsenal fans, maybe, and I've seen some do it online, and I know the online fan base doesn't represent everyone at all. But I've seen a lot of fans as things have been going well, almost using that against him. Like, we did, and look where we are now, and you're not a part of it to a degree. Yeah. But let's end on the positives, because, as we said, things started great and things really turned around, and it had a sour ending. And you can't talk about and ask the question, how will he be remembered at Arsenal, without discussing all those things. But I want to just ask ourselves here, A, was his time at Arsenal a success? And B, what were his best moments for Arsenal? I just want to list a couple of things here. We mentioned the FA Cup wins. Amazing. I've got here...
Well, I think you could go back even further than that. You have to remember the impact when he signed.
Yes. Phenomenal.
And that was overwhelming. I remember that time. I remember chatting to Robbie and a few other friends, and everyone was really genuinely excited
Yeah.
about him signing for the club. It was seen as a massive coup for the club. So that should not be understated.
I completely agree. He came to us at a time where the club wasn't in a great place, really, in terms of competition, being competitive, and he came to the club. Andrew says, no disrespect, James, you're still cool. Thank you. We're friends. We're all good. But I've got a few moments. His goal against Liverpool when we were 2-0 down at the Emirates.
Amazing.
In December, that just... I mean, I remember the roof just blowing off the Emirates at that moment. I remember the patting the badge to the Spurs fans. I think we drew that game, but that was away from home. I loved that. And then, of course, it goes without saying, the Ludogorets goal. You know,
I remember that. Yeah.
One of the greatest goals I've ever seen. You know, El Neni with a chip ball in behind, flick over the keeper, put two defenders on their arse and roll it in an empty net.
This is what I was saying earlier about he
Mesut
could do
Ozil.
things. That mercurial talent was on display that night.
Mm-hmm.
And there would be other games, too many to mention here, when he would seemingly drift in and out of a game, and then he would provide that one sublime moment, and you would say to yourself, there are very few players on the pitch, if any, that could have done a similar thing to him.
Completely and utterly
And that's the
agree.
type of talent we're talking about, you know.
So overall then, to wrap it up, success or not? Hit the comments with yes or no's. Was Mesut Ozil, £42 million signing from Real Madrid, who joined top 4 club Arsenal, was he a success? Yes or no?
Overwhelmingly, yes.
Very interested. We've got a no from Jamal. We've got a yes from MVA the Amigo. No from Alan. Yes from Hydro. No from Siam. Yes from Nervy. Yes from Mustafi. Yes from Tim. Yes from... is that Andrew? Andrew said no. Tommy said no. They're flying in. Lots of... It is so mixed. I think it's more yes. It's more yes than no's. My answer is yes, he was. He came in...
Although we do have to... And I'm going to say this because I've said it in the past. Towards the end, it wasn't working. And I think the physicality and the pace of the game kind of caught up with him. Physically, he wasn't what he was. I think, in fact, if you chart his career since he left Arsenal, you can see that.
Is it right
It's
to say...
just, you know...
Is it right to say he's almost a football legend more than he is an Arsenal legend? Do you know what I mean? You know, for the relationship with Ronaldo, for the FA Cup wins, for the amount of assists and the sheer talent he was, for the World Cup win. I kind of think if you're going to use the word legend with Ozil, it's probably more correct of him as a footballer than it was of him just for Arsenal. Because while I said he is a success, and he was a success for Arsenal, I also can't help but feel that the next stage Arsenal should have got to by signing a Mesut Ozil, I don't think that really came. I think he was a success because he won us trophies, because he played well in those finals, because he was part of some actually very good teams. They never got over the line with the title, but some very good teams that were competitive. But in terms of Arsenal kicking on from that moment, they didn't, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like I said, the ending wasn't a good one. And my mum always used to say to me, God bless her soul, is that whenever you're working somewhere, try and leave on a good note, because you never know what might happen in the future.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for Ozil, for different reasons, it didn't end well. And so that's kind of, for some people, sullied his memory. And like I said, I've done various shows with my man Curtis in which we talked about him looking a bit forlorn and a bit lost. And it was clear to me that the pace and the physicality and the intensity of the Premier League towards his latter years at Arsenal was starting to catch up with him, and he was no longer having the effect that he once did. But that's not to say that he hadn't been a great player for us.
I hear that. Well,
so over the course of his time, I would say definitely he's been a success. Yeah.
Well, these super chats from Miles says, I think Ozil was a shining light in a dark period at Arsenal. And William says, what happened with Mesut Ozil towards the end was bitter, I understand, but he definitely was a success for us Gooners. One of the most electric and creative players we've ever had in the Emirates era. All right, we'll leave it there. A big thank you, Laurie. It's been a pleasure breaking down his whole time at Arsenal. And I think we've had a really good in-depth discussion there.
We should do a poll.
Well, we would, but we're about to end the stream, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they can still send in.
Well, in the comments, send in your thoughts. Was it a success? You've all sent in a load of answers. A big thank you to you all. But let us know in the comment section whether you think it was a success for Arsenal, how you remember Mesut Ozil, how you reflect on some of your favourite memories of Mesut Ozil. And look, all we can say is, while it wasn't always, we talk about a slightly bitter ending to his time at Arsenal, while we know that not all Arsenal fans bought into the Ozil stuff or anything, then we can all collectively say that we wish him a very happy retirement.
Oh, yeah.
And a poll has gone up at the very last minute. So you've got 10 seconds while we bow out of here to quickly get in. I mean, 80% have said yes already. So that tells you everything. All right. Big thank you to everyone. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Don't forget to check out all the content that's come out on AFTV this week from a We Come in Peace video. There's a Behind the Numbers Part 2. Part 1 came out back in December with me in Turkish. There is a second one looking at our 28 games of the Premier League season this year and where we are with 10 games to go. And of course, Laurie is back in the building, which means you will get a Talk is Cheap very, very soon
next week.
Well. Next week. There you go. Big thanks to all of you. Hope you've enjoyed it. Catch you soon.
Don't forget to check out Bias Premier League show this week. We've got a brilliant show. Of course, Arsenal sitting pretty at the top of the league. And we'll also be finding out who are the big leader of the week. And our Boohoo Man with White Yardie and also Ty.
Peace.
You don't want to miss it.